Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. This is the Texas Society of CPAs Facebook Live Friday program. I'm Jody Ann Ray, President and CEO of the Texas Society of CPAs. And joining me this morning is Denise Davis with Davis Kaufman, based in Austin. Good morning, Denise.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for being here and having a little conversation with us this morning. While we're waiting for a couple of members to jump on, I will just remind everybody, we would love for you to go ahead and put a note in the comments and let us know that you're watching, where in the state you're watching from. We always like to know who we're sharing this time with. And also, if you have a question this morning as we're going through our conversation with Denise, we would love to have you put that in the comments as well, and we will try and get to as many comments as we can. So before we jump into our conversation today, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just give you a few little bits of information about some of the things that have happened this week. All right. So a couple of news items that you need to be aware of if you did not happen to see them. The first one is the SBA did provide some FAQs on Monday, specifically related to the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program. So if you need that information, that will be on our coronavirus resource page as well. On Tuesday, the IRS talked about if lenders erroneously filed or furnished 1099 miscellaneous forms regarding miscellaneous income and included the payments for SBA subsidized loans as income for a borrower, they're asking that those be corrected and re-provided, and that amounts exclude those subsidized loan payments. And then just on Wednesday, if you haven't seen it yet, I think we'll put a link to it in the comments. The AICPA sent a letter to the SBA to address some of the problems that are currently happening with applying for PPP loans. And most of those issues are currently surrounding second draw loans and some of the challenges with getting just the acceptance into the portals, into the systems, the delays and the resolutions for issues that are popping up, and also some additional guidance that's needed about the SBA capping first and second draw PPP loan amounts. So more details there, trying to work through it. There's tens of thousands of applications that have literally been held up with this. So hopefully that will get attention and some remedy quickly. Also, just wanted to point your attention to the AICPA Auditing Standards Board did issue an exposure draft on 3 related proposed standards for a new approach to quality management that just came out, if that's something of interest to you and you want to take a look at. And you probably saw on the news this morning that the US Senate did pass a budget resolution early this morning, actually. And once the House passes the same version of a budget measure, both chambers can move forward with moving forward and writing some type of additional relief efforts. That vote was along party lines with Vice President Harris casting her first tie-breaking vote. Okay, and one other thing I wanted to mention to you as well as before we jump in with Denise is just a reminder, it is Wear Red Day to provide awareness to cardiovascular disease and heart health. So just a good reminder about how important that is and to make sure that you and your loved ones are taking care of that. 1 in 3 women die of cardiovascular disease. So that's really important, and glad to raise a little bit of awareness to that. So Denise, thank you again for joining us. We have lots of members that have jumped on and are very looking forward to hearing what you have to say. We have Hyatt CPA is with us, in Richardson, and Diane in Lakeway, Ryan in Permian Basin, Larry in the Woodlands, Joey in Salina. Thank you all so much for jumping on and saying hi. We always appreciate that. Denise, you were so fabulous to join us last week for our Advocacy Day program. We appreciate that. For those that don't know, I'll let you know that the Society began working with Davis Kaufman this year to serve as part of our contract lobbying team. And so Davis Kaufman is joining Jack Roberts with Jack Roberts Associates to assist us in our efforts to advocate for not only our members, but the profession during the legislative session. And we had some great conversation last week. We had a lot of legislative visits. And one of the things that came up was tell us a little bit more about our lobbying efforts and how that works. So I thought, since many of our members don't know you, since you're new to working with us, we would just start with talking a little bit about you and your background and how you and your partner, Lisa Kaufman, formed Davis Kaufman.
Thank you. And I'm happy to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to everyone today. And I hope everyone's doing well, and happy Heart Health Day. Um, as Joanne said, my name is Denise Davis, and I'm the other partner with Davis Kaufman. Lisa Kaufman is my law partner, and we will be part of your external lobbying team this session. We've known Jack for years and have worked with Jack, and not only are we thrilled to be working with TXCPAs and with you as a group, but also with Jack. So we're thrilled about that. A little bit about our firm. Lisa and I are both attorneys, and we both come out of the legislature. We've both worked in the House and the Senate. I served in the House as general counsel to Lieutenant Governor Bill Ratliff at the time. Many of you may be familiar with him. And then over in the House as both House parliamentarian under two speakers, and as chief of staff under one speaker, Speaker Joe Strauss, during the 2011 session. Most of our work does focus on lobbying, and many of you may wonder, well, what does that mean? And what does a lobbyist do? What are you doing for our association? And most of that involves educating members about your legislative agenda that I think we're going to outline briefly today, and researching, answering questions, and leveraging the relationships that we have in both chambers, in both parties across the aisle, to really make sure that members understand what your areas of interest are and what you need. And we've been very lucky over the past, I'd say, 9 years. Next year will be our 10th anniversary, believe it or not, as a
great.
law firm. And so we've been pretty lucky with members in that they trust us. They rely on us and rely on our expertise, both on policy matters, in tax issues, on appropriations issues, and also in drafting and providing strategic advice.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Denise. That was one of the questions that came up with some of the feedback from the day, is tell us a little bit more specifically about how you go about that role. One of the other things I thought would be important to mention, because it was also some of the feedback, is someone had asked if we got rid of our key persons program. And we talked a little bit about that on Tuesday last week. But for everyone else that may not be familiar, can you talk a little bit about what a key persons program is and how it helps us in some of our outreach and advocacy?
Sure. And I think that at the, one of the bedrocks of successful advocacy, whether you are advocating as an individual or on behalf of an association for whatever issue, is having really good relationships, and good relationships with key decision makers in the Capitol and in Texas government in general. And one of the critical components here is to leverage the relationships that many of you have with individual members in the Capitol to really put forth the agenda and educate them about the agenda that we have and that we would like for them to support during the legislative session. So we did have our advocacy day last week. It was very successful. The members always enjoy it. There's a challenge this time, obviously, because that advocacy is virtual, and you can't really go knock on the doors and do the leave behinds and all of that. But having said all that, what's at the core of that is the relationships that each of you have with individual members and those who make decisions in Texas government. So it is a very important program. It's one that you relied on for many years, and it's one that we rely on as your outside lobby team to help continue to educate members of the legislature about your programs.
So if you have a relationship with a legislator, and it doesn't matter what kind of relationship it is, you could do their taxes, or it could be your neighbor or somebody that you see in the community, whatever it may be. Or if you're willing to establish a relationship with a legislator in your area, please let us know. We'd love to have that information. We'd love for you to be a part of our Key Persons program. It's not a heavy lift, but we do keep you abreast of issues that are coming up. And if there is some information that we need to get out to a legislator, we use our Key Persons network in order to do that. So thank you, Denise. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the legislative agenda for maybe anyone who wasn't able to join us last week. So one of the issues that's always at the top of our agenda is the sales tax on professional services. There always seems to be a little bit of misinformation about sales tax on professional services, how it would be administered, as well as what it might produce as far as additional revenue. So we want to make sure that we keep those issues front and center to legislators, particularly in time when the budget is tight and they might be looking to other areas for revenue opportunities. We also talked about the fingerprint requirement that the state board has to administer as a result of the sunset review last session. And they are required to get that done by August 31st of this year. Unfortunately, given the pandemic, that is going to be difficult for them to do. So Senator Charles Perry's office was very kind to draft a bill to make sure that we look for an extension of that time period for 1 year so that they're able to get all of that completed. Also looking at liability reform, particularly related to the pandemic and what that looks like as we move forward. Really no action on that at the federal level, so that's going to be something that states are addressing. Making sure that we're educating legislators about the importance of proper regulatory oversight for the profession, and that we're talking to them about how that proper oversight really does play an extremely important role in protecting the public. And of course, tax reform. So there's a link on the screen, and you can find a little bit more about the issues in our legislative agenda there as well. Anything that you wanted to add to that, or let people know about, Denise?
I think that the key is that we're here for you and we're here to help you. And our role working with you is to make sure that the members understand your issues and are comfortable with those so that they can make informed decisions on the floor. I think we're going to talk a little bit about taxes going into the next session, or now that we're in the session and now that we've done the committee assignments in a little bit more detail. But suffice it to say that all of these items on the legislative agenda have received very favorable input thus far from members of the legislature. They're really important to you and they know that. And we're looking forward to working with you to make sure that we get these things resolved during the session.
So it's not always necessarily about what's on our legislative agenda and what our priorities are, but sometimes we need to be really aware of things that could come up that may impact the profession, or perhaps some things that have some unintended consequences. Can you talk a little bit about how we go about monitoring what is being proposed and what impact that might have?
Yes, and I think that especially given the challenges of this session with the pandemic and all of the things that we are, all of the challenges that we're facing and not being able to be in the Capitol as much as we were last session, one of the things that's really critical is legislative tracking. And that is what Jodianne is referring to, which is that we spend quite a bit of time looking at bills that have been filed to assess the unintended consequences that they may have on each of you if those bills pass, and looking for things that could have unintended benefits as well. So it's our job to look at both sides of the coin on all bills that are filed to see if there are any unintended consequences or any positive things that you all might want to acknowledge in that legislation. And again, I can't underscore enough how important it is to have the relationships that you have, and to be able to leverage those relationships to help us advocate on your behalf in the Capitol when these bills are filed.
And if you're just joining us, I'm Jody Ann Ray with TXCPA, and joining me this morning is Denise Davis. Denise is a partner with Davis Kaufman, an Austin-based firm, and they specialize much of their work in the area of lobbying, and they're serving in a role to help lead our contract lobby efforts this session in the legislature. So thanks to those of you that have jumped on. We have Kashana from Houston and Andy from San Antonio. We have Perky, Michelle from San Angelo. We have Jim from El Paso. Thank you all. It's good to see you, and it's good to spend a few minutes with you. Denise, let's talk a little bit now about, just some of those issues that we've been talking about a lot, about how it's a very different session. We have to operate differently, and kind of what's new or transpired or what we've learned recently.
Okay. Most of you see the screen that Jody Ann is, the slide that Jody Ann has shared with you. That's really important. It's got some very important information. And I like to start by saying that on any given day during the session, we have about 6,000 plus people from the general public walking around the session, in addition to the legislators and their staff. So thousands of people coming to the Capitol during the session, because the Capitol is a public building and it belongs to the public. So a lot of people coming and participating. Well, with COVID, the legislature and the State Preservation Board, which is the entity that controls the physical grounds and the physical Capitol, they have all worked together to establish some safety protocols to protect members of the public and those who work in the Capitol who come into the building. And some of those are outlined here, including self-testing stations at the north entrance of the Capitol. If you decide that you do want to go into the Capitol, you can have a rapid test. Takes about 15 minutes to determine whether or not you are positive for COVID or not, and help you to, make an informed decision about going into the Capitol. The Senate has also said that in their procedures, that if you have a vaccine, you're presumed to be COVID negative. The testing is not required. And so arguably you could take your vaccine card with you into the Capitol and you would be fine. You can see here they have committee hearings listed. Most of the testimony that they are going to take is going to be invited testimony, although the public is always welcome to come and testify. However, if you do want to testify as a member of the public and it's not invited, then it won't be virtual, and you do have to go into the Capitol and appear in person to testify. The committees just came out this week on the House side. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And so this is somewhat untested. We're not totally sure how the process is going to work yet, but that's what they've outlined in their rules. They are limiting access to the floor. That's not that unusual. It's usually limited, but even more so with respect to staff this time. And then we now have all of the different protocols for the legislative offices that they have amassed, and it's specific to each individual office, which can be a little bit challenging. We are in the process internally in our office of trying to collect all that information. We're happy to provide that to Jody Ann and to Kenneth if you need it, if you think that you're going into the Capitol. We are trying to get all of that information and have it at your fingertips. So we will be able to provide that. I think you can by and large expect fewer bills to come to the floor this time. We thought that fewer bills would actually be filed, but I think that many members feel like maybe filing a bill is the only way I can have my voice heard this time, because I know that not very many bills are actually going to pass. And so we think that there will be fewer bills ultimately that come out, but don't be surprised if you see an uptick in the number of bills that are filed. The House will begin referring bills next week because they've only just appointed their committees. So we'll be watching those trends and keep you abreast of those. Again, I think you can expect less public testimony because you'll have to go into the Capitol to have that testimony, and really a potentially shorter session. Most of you who are keeping track know that the legislature has sort of been in and out, almost like what you see in a special session. They have come in for a few days and then they've adjourned for a week and a half, 2 weeks, etc. And now that the committees have been appointed, we'll see how all of that works together. But we are still expecting them to spend a significantly less amount of time on the floor, which could ultimately lead to some special sessions down the road. The last day of session is May 31st. And so if they don't get everything done by May 31st, I think we're expecting some specials.
That makes sense. So we did have some pretty big news out of Austin this week on a couple of areas. And one of those is Governor Abbott talked about a state of the state address earlier this week on Tuesday, I believe. He also talked about some of his legislative priorities. I wanted to know if you could comment on some of these and some of your thoughts as well when you were listening to his remarks as well.
Yes, and so I just briefly to touch on a few of these have been issues that Governor Abbott has been concerned about for years, and it is a pretty bold agenda, is what I would say. And from everything that we are hearing, the governor has worked significantly, spent quite a bit of time working with the stakeholders behind the scenes to get these things through the legislature. At the top is the broadband internet access. And those of you who have been home during COVID, have children at home during COVID, in school, understand the challenges of just generally of working with technology. Well, take that and consider what that means if for those of you out there who are in rural areas, what that means. And so the governor has moved that to the top of his agenda because he knows that broadband internet access is critical for education, for healthcare, especially with telemedicine and many other things. Mm-hmm. The issue of defunding the police, most of you have seen in the news over the past year, and that is a major issue for the governor with respect to local governments. He's been particularly concerned about Austin, the city of Austin, but generally any local government efforts to defund the police. Same with changing the bail system to make sure that there is a reasonable balance between treating defendants or those who have been accused of crimes fairly, but also balancing that with public safety. And then ensuring election integrity, a wide range of issues. And I actually had the privilege of listening in on the governor's teletown hall last week. He talked a little bit about what that means in election integrity, and just said that he's very concerned about voter fraud and also access to polls and all of that. So we're waiting to see what all of that means as he spells that out. Providing civil liability protections for businesses that were open during the pandemic. That is an issue I think that's going to have quite a bit of bipartisan support. There is negotiated legislation in that regard. Our organization, as you know, has been very interested in that issue and engaged in it as well. So it is a major piece of legislation and a major priority, frankly, for the governor, for businesses, for the general public as well. And we're expecting that legislation to move fairly quickly.
Very good. Thank you so much for that overview. If you hadn't seen it, this will give you a quick little summary, but also you can go back and listen to the governor's remarks if you're interested. One other issue that just came out yesterday is our new Speaker of the House, Dave Phelan, announced his House Committee Chairman list. And so this is just a few of the more committees that affect what we do. And I thought you would, if I could ask if you could just make a few comments about some of these, what your thoughts are and what we're seeing changing here and how it might impact how the legislature goes about its work.
Sure. One of the things that I think, and I didn't mention this in talking about the governor's comments in Teletown Hall, But I think it's relevant with respect to the governor, and frankly, with these committee appointments and some other things that we'll see through the session, is that there doesn't seem to be an appetite for new taxes coming out or coming down. And that includes, we think, even taxes on professionals or anything like that. The legislature doesn't seem to have an appetite for that, which is very good for all of us. And you can look at the composition of these committees if you drill down a little deeper, and you'll see that that is really the case. We have quite a few new chairmen, so some substantial turnover and some shifting of committee positions. So Greg Bonin, who's a doctor out of Galveston, will be the new chair of appropriations. Dustin Burrows, who's an attorney out of Lubbock, will chair calendars. And as you know, calendars is really the traffic cop for all legislation. They make the decision about the types of bills that come to the floor and the priority in which those bills will be considered. So it is widely considered to be the most powerful committee in the Texas House, and frankly, one of the most powerful in the legislature.
Mhm.
After that, you have licensing, which can have quite a few bills that impact our organization that come through, that can come through. And Representative Thompson, who's been in the legislature, she's number 2 in seniority in the House behind Tom Craddock. So she's been there quite a while and has always been very interested in what we call scope of practice issues that go through licensing and administrative procedures. We call it the LAP committee, and she's out of Houston. Local and consent will be chaired this time by Charlie Guerin, who is from Fort Worth, who used to chair House administration. And I skipped over House admin because most of that is sort of inside baseball for you, but that is the committee that covers the budget for the House members and their furniture and all of that. Pensions, also known as the PIPS committee, will be chaired by Raphael Anchia, who's an attorney out of Dallas, who's very familiar with pension and banking issues, and well steeped in that. So that'll be a great committee for him. Redistricting, many of you may know Todd Hunter. He's been a friend of ours for many years. He's an attorney out of Corpus Christi, and he will do quite a bit of heavy lifting on the redistricting committee because it is a session for redistricting. State Affairs is the catch-all committee. It is the committee under the rules that is considered the committee that takes up anything that the speaker considers to be of statewide import. And so Chairman Patty will be chairing that. He is a new chairman for that committee. He's a former mayor. He is out of Marshall, and he'll be leading a committee of about 11 members that's got quite a bit of new membership.
Mhm.
And Morgan Meyer, if you're from Dallas, you might know him. He is the new chair of Ways and Means. As you know, that is the tax committee. We spend quite a bit of time monitoring that committee on your behalf. And he is the new chair of that committee. Dustin Burrows, who now chairs calendars, chaired that committee last session. So Morgan will be a new chairman of that committee. He'll have lots to learn. And I encourage you, if you know any members that are chairing these committees, please let Jody Ann know. She'll let us know, and we will make note of that and use that information as it's appropriate to do so.
Thank you for that overview, Denise. Really, really helpful. We like to reach out and just touch base with our members of the legislature when we're not asking for things as well. So sometimes we just like to say, congratulations, or, good job or well done on things that are coming up as well. So that we keep those lines of communication open. So thank you so much for giving us this little overview, a little update on what's happened this past week in Austin that we need to be aware of. And we're so grateful to have you and Lisa working with us and on our team to make sure that the society and the profession is well represented throughout the legislative session. Thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you. And thank you for having us. We're happy and thrilled and honored to be a part of your team.
And if you all have questions or thoughts or just things that we didn't cover here today that you want to know a little bit more about, please send them to us. You can drop them in the comments. We'll get back to you even after we're off the air, or send myself a note, or Kenneth Besserman, our Director of Government Affairs and Special Counsel. And we're happy to talk to you at any time about questions that you have about things that are happening in the legislative process or the legislature. So a couple of quick updates before we jump off. We are trying to make sure that we're keeping you up to date on anything that's happening in the latest breaking news. So watch your email communications. Please follow us or share things that you find of interest on from our social media pages, and anything that's related to COVID-19 relief or legislation or any of those issues you can always find on our coronavirus resource page. So check that out as well. Lots of CPE coming up. We start to shift a little bit in tax season with a focus on business and industry. And B&I month is in April. We'll be working on that and doing some special programming around it. And another shout out, we are working on our career videos. So we use these to help really talk about all the different paths that a CPA can take in their professional journey and in their career. And it really helps us raise awareness with students. So we would love to have you participate in this little project. It's just a 1-minute video showcasing your career and what you've done. And it really does help students see how they might be able to move forward in their careers. Doesn't have to be professionally produced. We can help you with whatever you need. Would love to have you participate. And of course, exchange is always open, and with tax season upon us, lots of conversation on things that are going on there. It's all member-to-member communication. So if you have something you want to share or a question that you want to ask, that is a terrific resource. So that is it for today. Again, thank you, Denise. We know you're extremely busy during the session, so we appreciate all the time that you give us. Thanks everybody for taking some time today. We're happy to be with you. We hope you have a great weekend. Remember to stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you back right here next Friday morning for our Facebook Live programming. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.